don't want to say I think everybody should be resistance training, but I think I do. Jeff.
Hey, Andy.
Good. I'm going to say good morning. I'm guessing it is going to still be morning for you, isn't it?
Yeah, I got an hour still.
Fair enough. Fair enough. How are you, sir? Whereabouts are you exactly?
Atlanta.
Oh, fair enough. Okay. Yeah. So East Coast. So you're EST, right?
Yep. You're UK?
Yes. So for the moment, UK. Normally reside in Dubai. Welcome to the show. Thank you for applying and thank you for wanting to come on and spending a bit of time talk to me. That's awesome. And I've looked through obviously the notes that you dropped in on the application, so I've got some information there. But for the sake of anybody listening or watching, and again, the reason that we do this is we need to allow someone to ask the question or sort of explore, I guess, the areas that maybe that they feel that are holding them back the most. Or really, another way to put it, if I could answer or help with the one thing that would unlock the door to help you make progress, what would that be right now for you?
So mine is diet related. A lot of stuff on intermittent fasting, and I did that. I would say religiously for several months with no appreciable results. And then I actually just read your update on fiber tied to protein intake. And so I know I need to maintain the fiber side, but my other question is around the amount of protein that I should be, ingesting per day, which I've seen anything from 120 to 240 grams given my weight and age and, stuff. So,
okay.
So really the mix is, and then if I do include intermittent fasting, those seem to be, because I see a lot of, really good breakfast starting meals, protein-based breakfast meals, and that doesn't compute with intermittent fasting. So,
Gotcha.
What's the mix of those two and how do we put it all together?
Gotcha. What's the underlying goal? So I can then context it towards the underlying goal for you.
So I'm 6'4", 275. I've got one of those scales that gives me my body mass, body fat, visceral fat, some of those kinds of things. So I'm in my Wii Fit tells me I'm in the obese category.
Okay. So how long? So you're 275. Is that a state? Is it going up? Is it stable? What's it doing?
Been between 265 and 285 for 20 years.
2 decades. Okay. So 2 decades. Okay. And for anything that you've tried really in those last 2 decades, you've moved 10 pounds up, 10 pounds down. Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
Not that it's a weight loss goal number, but is there a number that maybe you've been at in the past where you're like, that's probably a good place for me to hang out, do you think?
I guess just from a BMI standpoint, just to get under the obese category, you need to target about 240, 245, something like that.
Okay. And that's respectfully, that's just to get underneath obese, correct?
Yeah.
So what would be true success for you? Because obviously that's just to get out of a bracket. But where do you think, if I could wave a magic wand?
Yeah.
And take you to where would you love to be?
So just seeing you on videos and stuff, I can't imagine that your BMI is really low.
So technically, when I'm heavier, when I'm carrying more muscle, I'm technically obese in terms of the BMI scale.
Right.
But at the same time, I have veins running up my abs. So that's where BMI can certainly be a little bit misleading. Yeah.
Yep. So that's where I'd for me, 245 would be a good number if I was in shape. If the other measurements were
so less fat, more 245, less fat, more muscle, something along those lines.
Exactly.
The holy grail for all men. Okay, I've got you. Okay, so right now, losing fat. Okay, so let's go to the intermittent fasting. Now, intermittent fasting in of itself has absolutely nothing to do with losing body fat. Nothing whatsoever.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to caveat that with a few things. So let's imagine this is a day. Okay, let's imagine, just for argument's sake, to lose body fat, you needed to eat 2,000 calories a day. So to lose body fat, you burn a certain amount of calories a day. We call this our TD, total daily energy expenditure. It's the amount of, and it's your BMR, so your basal metabolic rate, which is the amount of calories and energy your body uses if you were in a coma, like it's just to keep you alive. You've then got the moving and fidgeting and talking and all this sort of, you've then got the thermic effect of food, and then cardio and training and exercise, right? They're the kind of main categories. The biggest category is BMR. In other words, the one that really doesn't change very much at all. This will be the amount of calories you burn when you're sleeping. It doesn't change very much. Now, let's imagine to be in a deficit, in other words, under your TD, your total daily energy expenditure. Let's just imagine, for argument's sake, you needed to eat 2,000 calories. I have no idea if that's a number, just for the sake of this.
Yeah. That's fine.
Let's imagine this is a day. Okay. I don't know which way round I'm facing you, but let's say that's the morning and that's the evening, for argument's sake. Okay. So let's imagine we eat from the moment we wake to the moment we sleep, the whole day. And we eat our 2,000 calories. Okay. That's a day's worth of eating, and it's 2,000 calories. Let's imagine we now eat intermittent fasting style. So we eat at 12 p.m., for example, and we finish at 8 p.m., for example. Okay. Now we're in here. But we still eat 2,000 calories. There's now no difference, technically. Within reason, we've still ate 2,000 calories inside a 24-hour window. Now, also, let's imagine I got you to intermittent fast. Okay, so we're now eating in 12 till 8, but I make you eat 3,000 calories. I could make you get fat by intermittent fasting you, because it's just an amount of calories in a window. So intermittent fasting in of itself has got nothing to do with fat loss. Can it help? Yes. Here's how it can help. So many people find, me included, this includes me for sure, but many people find that if they get up and they eat earlier in the day, a hormone, our hunger hormone called ghrelin, tends to start to become active. So we might eat breakfast, then we might snack midday, we might have a lunch. Before we realize it, we're getting to the end of the day and we're snacking and we've eaten way over our calories because we started to eat. In other words, we had more time to eat. So what we tend to find is with people dieting, and I tend to do this by accident. I eat at about 11 to 12 every day. That's when I start eating. I don't really think about it. I get up, I go to cardio, I work, I go to the gym, I come home, I eat. That's basically it's just how my life works. But what it means is I get to 12 o'clock and I'm like, yay, I get to eat all of my food for the rest of the day. So, but what it's done is it's controlled my hunger, because until I eat my first meal, I don't feel hungry. I'm not food centric. I'm not thinking about food because I haven't ingested any. I've drank a lot of water. I've drank electrolytes. Sometimes I'll get some amino acids in there, which is technically breaking my fast, but it's in liquid form. So it's not something that's hitting my stomach, whether my stomach's having to digest and then ghrelin's going flying up. So in terms of controlling appetite, intermittent fasting can certainly be a protocol that we could use to make that beneficial. In terms of overall calories, well, I could get you to sit down here and eat like four or five burgers and a whole cheesecake, and you've stuffed the whole day, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like a few bags of pretzels, and like before you realize it, you've ate 5,000 calories, because it's obviously possible. You've ate 5,000 calories, but you've intermittent fast. So I'm only explaining this to sort of say that the intermittent fasting element is not a fat loss technique per se, but if understood, it can certainly be helpful. Now, the other benefit, and I get this, is it means my digestion has had longer to relax. So I personally suffer with IBS. I have done for 11 years. Normally speaking, if I get up and I drink lots of water and I don't start eating till 11, well, if I finish at, I don't know, 8 the night before, that's 8 the night before, all the way round to 11. That means my stomach has had a chance to at least rest. And it goes through a thing called autophagy, which is it gets to replace its cells. It just gets time to relax. There's certainly benefit in that. And I think as we age, I think that becomes probably the I do think that probably becomes the biggest reason to intermittent fast. In other words, probably longevity reasons other than outright fat loss reasons. So is intermittent fasting beneficial? Yeah, for sure. I do think certainly, I will very, very rarely have food before I train, and very rarely before 11 o'clock. And normally if I do tend to find that I struggle to digest it that early in the morning. So that, I suppose, answers that. In terms of, okay, protein levels. So you weigh 275. Now, so it would be easy to say that the easy equation for protein is a gram of protein per body weight per pound of body weight.
Right.
So if you weighed 275 pounds, then we could say 275 grams of protein. Now, this is where things get interesting, because there has to be let's say someone comes to us and they weigh 300, they are obese, and they weigh 350 pounds. There's no reason that we would give them 350 grams of protein, because what's all that protein doing? And that's a lot of meat and fish and stuff to try and digest. So what we tend to do, depending on how heavy someone is and where their goal is give them the protein to the level of the weight that they want to end up at. That can be a relatively decent marker. Now, that's very different from the numbers you gave me earlier, because I think you said 170 to something or other in terms of.
Yeah, the low end was like 170, but then it did. I've seen that also where it's match your goal weight, so 240.
Yeah. So an easy way to consider this, and I don't know all these numbers, but let's play this out. Let me get my calculator out just for fun. Let's say, for example, you needed 2,000 calories a day to lose weight. Now, I'm not saying that these numbers are correct, because I obviously don't know all the details. So let's say 2,000. Now, let's say we gave you 245 grams of protein, because that's where you wanted to end up. Well, 245 times 4. Now, we times it by 4, because for every gram of protein, you get 4 calories. Okay? So that means 980 calories are coming from your protein.
Okay.
Which is nearly half your daily amount, isn't it? Because you're only getting to, right, okay. So we might now turn around and say, okay, let's now try and work out your fat percentage. Now, what we might go is say, okay, we would kind of work this one out backwards. I tend to go, let's maybe give you 20% of your total calories from fat. So that would be 2,000 times 0.2. So that's 400 calories coming from fats. I might now divide that by 9. The reason being is there are 9 calories per grams of fat. In other words, evolutionarily, our body was very wise at which of the 3 macronutrients it decided to store. It stored the most efficient in terms of the energy it keeps. It's like our body's very clever. Okay, so now we've got 2,000 minus 980 minus 400. That leaves us 620 calories left over. Divide that by 4, which is 155 grams of carbs. I'm not saying these are your numbers, but we've just worked out that, roughly speaking, if someone needed 2,000 calories, 245 grams of protein, 44 grams of fats, and 155 grams of carbohydrates would be a reasonable place to start if someone needed 2,000 calories. Now, there's many, many, many caveats that I have not included in that. We could go lower, or I could have chosen to go much higher in fats if I believe the person to be relatively insulin resistant. So are you diabetic, pre-diabetic? Okay.
No.
So normally speaking, someone who's carrying reasonable amounts of body fat are relatively insulin resistant. Why? Because their body just is partitioning very, very quickly towards body fat. So to try and get some degree of sensitivity back in terms of insulin, what we do is we bring carbohydrates down and push. Carbohydrates and fats are our 2 kind of energy macros. They do other things, but protein rebuilds and etc. The other 2 are energy. So we can fluctuate these around. We don't want them both high for sure. Like, that's how we get fat quickly. But we could have, if someone's very lean, we would probably keep fats very low, pump carbohydrates very high, because they're going to get through the carbs. If someone's walking around with a good degree of body fat, we might want to try and resensitize their body, bring carbs down, fats up. Now, this is kind of where a ketogenic diet may have a degree of benefit. But the problem is we do this and then someone thinks it's the fact that they're on a ketogenic diet that they're losing weight. It's not. It's because one, carbs are very low and they're losing glycogen in their muscles. And it's certainly not a long-term fix, is it, to be on a ketogenic diet, because carbohydrates are nice and most people want to eat them. But in a short period of time, it could certainly help, sort of resensitize the body a little bit. Not something I do a whole lot, but I certainly have got a few people where, carbs and fats are low, but quite equal. And then as I see them get leaner, I push fats down and bring carbs up and keep the protein basically where it is.
Alphas, I interrupt this show with a simple message. This show is here to benefit you and your progression to the best version of yourself. But not only just you, it's also here to benefit the people around you, your loved ones, your friends, other alphas in your vicinity. So why not do a really cool thing today? Something that I would thank you for and maybe someone else would. Share this podcast with at least one other alpha out there who you know would benefit from it. Why not share the information, share the ability for someone else to grow? I'm sure they would thank you. I 100% would absolutely thank you. This podcast only grows by our listeners, our followers doing amazing things like giving us 5-star reviews, downloading podcasts, subscribing, and then, of course, sharing it with other people. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Share it with one person, and, of course, drop us a 5-star review, download the podcast, and, of course, subscribe. And now back to the show.
So those are probably the two things that I think stand out of the two things that you've mentioned. So one, picking protein in terms of grams at the weight at the goal. Do you do a lot of resistance training at the moment?
More calisthenics.
Gotcha. Any particular reason you've chosen that as a modality for training?
Home-based.
Fair enough. Yeah. So it's what you. So
I do a little bit of dumbbell work, but light, and partly just still rehabbing the shoulder.
Gotcha. Any other injuries outside of the shoulder?
No.
Okay. How bad's the shoulder?
Coming along really well. I had surgery years ago that had never really fully rehabbed it. So now trying to throw the ball, play ball with my grandson, I couldn't. I had no strength to snap. And
so something like that's going to really hurt you. Yeah.
So it was largely, although I had pretty good mobility, it was like that last 10 or 15% that was almost frozen in there. And so it's breaking that all up and then strengthening it all back.
Gotcha. So, and I think certainly, I imagine sometimes that might hurt quite a lot, bringing your arm right up high.
Not so much anymore. It's pretty far along.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to get the last few percentages. I've switched from flexibility to strength now.
Good. And of course, I'm not saying whether you should be doing this now, but certainly moving into a program where a degree of resistance-based training, so that means using loading correctly and safely, for a number of reasons. One, because accruing muscle mass, and I'm not talking about, ending up here, but accruing muscle mass is always going to help in terms of long-term, longevity, because it helps with our metabolism. It's going to help with overall posture. It's going to help with joint stability, joint mobility, joint health. So I would, I think, I don't want to say I think everybody should be resistance training, but I think I do. I think to a degree everybody should be doing something to at least maintain the muscle that they've got, because obviously as we age we become generally less inactive, we pick up more injuries on this and that and the other, and generally we see people dropping in terms of muscularity. I'm not saying we need to all walk around buff and hench and mass, not at all. That's not healthy either, but certainly maintaining muscularity for long-term health is beneficial, and therefore keeping body fat low, keeping protein high, and lifting weights safely and correctly, and it progressing. There being progression. The thing with body weight training, it's great, absolutely. Very hard to progress though, because our body doesn't change weight. Now, someone could say to me, "Yeah, but I could do more reps." I'm like, "Yeah, sure, yeah, we could," but it's definitely not efficient. Whenever I think of an answer for something, logically, I try and take my answer to the absolute extreme and see if the thing still works. Let's think of a plank. So a plank is a body weight exercise. I know it's a stable one, but it's still a body. Right. Well, there's people out there that have planked for, I think the Guinness record is 6-7 hours or something. Like, I don't know what it is, but it's a lady. And I mean, all credit to her. Like, incredible. I'm not sure the goal for most people is to plank for 7 hours. I think the goal for most people would be to have a very strong and great core. So point being is sometimes the length of time we do something is never going to actually make the difference. We then have to add some load to it to actually put muscle under an increasing degree of tension. And it's that increasing degree of tension and intensity and volume and frequency and these things that we can change that ultimately lead a body to have no choice but to improve.
Right.
And they're the things we should be focused on. And then therefore, whether we're intermittent fasting or not just comes down to, does it fit my day? In terms of when and where I'm training, am I one of those sorts of people that gets up and has a breakfast, like, maybe I have some oats in the morning and then I'm starving all day. And by the time I get to the end of the day, I've bust my calories again. That would be me. So I'm like, okay, I'll just start eating later. And then the protein side of things is generally, I would say pretty straightforward in terms of probably, obviously it's a lot. Here's something to consider though. That's a lot more protein than you might be eating now, I imagine, right?
Correct.
So you would want to try and work your way up there slowly.
Okay.
And I wouldn't jump there overnight because, I don't know what you eat. And whether that's coming from fishes and meats and powders and whatever it might be coming from, work your way up slowly because your poor old digestion is going to be suddenly like, the heck's going on? Because protein takes quite a while to digest. Generally, the easiest digesting proteins will be things like a whey protein or fish. I lean quite heavily on white fish because like I said, I suffer from IBS. So I lean heavily on white fish. I'm not saying it's my favorite. My favorite would be steak. There's no question about that. But I can't eat a rump steak or a fillet steak, every day. One, it's expensive. Two, I just wouldn't physically digest them quick enough. So yeah, I'll have a steak a few times a week. Absolutely no issue with that. I'll have chicken. I'll have my eggs. And then I'll also have I'll eat white fish a couple of times a day because it's just goes in and it's gone. And I find that a very easy way to get a lot of protein in, but my body's like just assimilates it quite quick. Easy on the digestion. That's what we want to be thinking about. We're both not 20 anymore. When we're 20, our body just goes like a turbine for food. Now we have to think a bit more about what we're putting in, how well we chew it, how well we digest it, because otherwise we might get away with it for 2 or 3 days, but by day 5, we're like, I ain't getting food. You know what I mean? You just feel backed up and you're not getting through food.
Yeah. So really good information. I got 4x on protein. I've got 9x on fat. What's the multiplier of carb?
4 calories per gram of both protein and carbohydrates. 9 calories per gram of fats. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm guessing your whole discussion around the protein piece, the intermittent fasting would help that, because it's giving me longer to process that instead of just keep piling it on.
That I would say person dependent. Depends on the protein sources, depends on how well they digest. For example, I'm notoriously bad at chewing, which sounds silly, but the size of the chunk of the food that we swallow, if we've got a chunk this big, the stomach acid can only work on the outside. That's a lot of undigested stuff in the middle. Whereas if you take like a mince, I want to say you guys call it something different. You don't call it mince, you call it
ground.
Oh yeah, ground turkey. Yeah. So you think by the time you've eaten it, it's already a small little morsel.
Yeah.
That's a really easy hack for people that don't digest food well. I'm like, just buy ground minced turkey, ground minced beef, because by the time you've cooked it up, you haven't got to cut it and you haven't got to chew it. It's tiny. So if someone was eating, say, that a whey protein shake and maybe some fish, maybe in that intermittent window or even over a full day, someone's getting through it quite easy. Again, this is where it's a self-experiment.
Yeah.
We just, if we're super, super consistent, we then, our body generally tells us what we should do. So if we're getting through food really easy, we're like, cool, that seems to be something that's working. If after about 3 days, you're like, I am not digest. Right. Okay. We know that something in there isn't working, and then we can adapt and change. This is where most people go wrong. They change things willy-nilly all over the place and then have no idea what's working and what not. The goal is get as many things, as many plates spinning and settled as possible.
Right.
And then sit back and be like, right, am I getting leaner? Am I building muscle? Am I recovering better? Is stress better? Is sleep better? Whatever the thing is I'm focused on right now, if it's improving, don't change anything. If it's not improving, you then go after changing the one thing that's going to move the needle the most. Now, that's where coaching, I would say, comes in, because from a coach looking in externally, we're not emotionally attached to what it feels like to be in the situation. We can look and say, right, well, you know what I'd say, Jeff? I'd say this seems to be the area that we need to focus on. And you might be like, oh, I really like that thing. And we're like, okay, you might really like it. But from our point of view, it seems to be where the bottleneck is. And I would say that's where external coaching can certainly lend that non-biased view into something. But generally speaking, I would then say it's treat things as an experiment. Just change the one thing that you need to change. Yeah, for sure.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Perfect. It's been a pleasure to get to talk to you, and hopefully some of those things there I've given you are going to give you a bit of an insight and certainly a bit of a direction to go forward. And again, go put some things in place. And we continue to do this. And so obviously, you're more than welcome to ask to come back on again. I have because it's nice then to see people a few times over, right, and see how things are going. And of course, if you've got any follow-up questions, I'm pretty sure we must be connected on LinkedIn, maybe something like that, or email. You just reach out. We're always here to help in one way or another. All right, Jeff?
Thank you so much.
Been a pleasure. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.